get me. God prepares a table for me, to dine with me, to sit with me, to be a part of me. And he does it in the presence, not looking at you, he does it in the presence of my enemies. He does it to say to the enemies, I value this person. I've anointed this person. I am in fellowship with this person. And this person belongs to me. This morning I want to take a look at a text where Jesus does that very thing. He sits down at a table and dines with someone in the presence of their enemies. And while the story is somewhat familiar, there's just a couple of things I'd like to reflect upon as we go through the story today. It starts in Matthew chapter 9, and beginning with verse 9, it says, as Jesus passed from there, he saw a man called Matthew sitting at the tax booth, and he said to him, follow me. And he rose and followed him. I love this text in the story, the narrative in this text, for multiple reasons, but one that I find interesting is Matthew is writing his own story. And he does it in third person. He does it because the story isn't about Matthew. He's writing the story of Jesus. He's telling the ministry, the gospel, the message, the good news of Jesus. He just happens to be one person within that story. But even as we get introduced to him, and Matthew, Mark, and Luke all tell the same story, Matthew tells his story in honesty. He's a tax collector. Mark and Luke do not call him Matthew. Mark and Luke use his name, which is Levi. I don't know why we go by Matthew. I know Matthew is more of a Greek name and Levi is a Hebrew name, but I don't know why they wanted to impress Levi upon us. But I just have to imagine that when he was born, when his parents took him to the temple and named him and did whatever needed to be done to redeem him, they named him Levi. I just cannot imagine that they're saying, my dream job for this little boy is to grow up and become a Roman tax collector. I think the very name that they give him tells me at least that they seem to be spiritually minded people. Whether they're from the tribe of Levi, whether they were of the priesthood, I mean, I don't know any of those things. I just know that was his name. And he's a tax collector. And his friends were not the great Jewish religious leaders of the day. In fact, his friends were other tax collectors. They were the people that you love to hate. They were so hated that even the common Jew looked down upon these people. I mean, they're the bottom of the barrel because of their willingness to collect taxes for Rome. They were seen many times as traitors. And Jesus passed by and he says to Matthew, follow me. Do you think that would have had an impact on some of the other disciples? like the one that the Bible lists as Simon the Zealot. Do you think Simon the Zealot loved Matthew the tax collector? As Jesus reclined at the table, it says in Matthew 9 and verse 10, as Jesus reclined at the table in the house, behold, many tax collectors and sinners came and were reclining with Jesus and his disciples. Jesus is hanging out with all the wrong people. And, and he's going to get called on it. I actually like shopping secondhand stores. I don't know why. Maybe I'm inherently a cheap person, but I like discounts. I don't mind doing, if my age gets me a discount, I'll give you my age. I'll do whatever it takes. But when you go to a store and they put something and they tag it as is, it's a piece of machinery, it's clothing, it's whatever, and it's tagged as is. That's the legal terminology for buyer beware. There is something wrong with this article of clothing, something wrong with this particular thing that you're looking at, and so we are selling it as is. Irregular if it comes to clothing. And sometimes as you look through it, you can say, well, I can live with that scratch or that dent on this piece of this washing machine or whatever it might be, or I can live with, a button not working right on this shirt, but when you buy something as is, you know that it is imperfect. When Jesus reclines at this table, he's reclining with as-is people. He is sitting down with and affirming tax collectors and sinners. And that doesn't make sense to most people. Jesus shouldn't have to do that. Jesus shouldn't lower himself to that level. Jesus should understand that there are certain people that they don't cut it with everybody else. They're not going to measure up. But Jesus reclines at the table. And in the middle of this party, Matthew records for us in verse 11. When the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" I have to tell you, I find something underhanded here, and you can correct me if you think I am wrong or reading too much into the passage. The Pharisees don't go to Jesus. The Pharisees go to the disciples of Jesus. There is a underhanded sowing of discord. Here's the idea. It is as though they wanted to plant the seed inside of the mind of the disciples. Even your teacher's doing something you know is not a good thing. And you don't want to be here either. So why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? Again, I would have to tell you, I believe that there are going to be people in that discipleship group that had issues with Matthew being a tax collector, even a former tax collector. to think that Jesus would say, "Come and follow me." To this particular man, I can understand why the Pharisees really can go after the disciples on this one. Why would your teacher do such a thing? How Jesus gets wind of it, I don't know, but he does. Verse 12 and 13, when he, that is Jesus, heard it, he said, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, for I came not to call the righteous, but the sinners." Jesus makes two statements and draws the parallel between them. The first is simply this: those who are well, healthy, they don't need a physician. Those who are sick do. In this case, Jesus is saying, you see yourself as well. You see no need of me. Jesus isn't even arguing with them. He's not trying to put them down. He's not trying to make any type of statement. In this opening phrase, he's just simply saying, here's the fact of the matter is, those who don't think they need a doctor never see a doctor. That's just the facts. The problem is sometimes you ought to see a doctor. But because you don't think you need to see a doctor, you don't see the doctor. When Jesus writes to the church in Laodicea, he talks about how they see themselves. And they saw themselves as rich. They saw themselves in need of nothing. But Jesus says, but you are poor, blind, pitiable. What you need to do is buy from me the right clothing, to put salve on your eyes. See, the truth of the matter is sometimes our arrogance says, I don't need Jesus. I'm well. I'm good enough. Jesus doesn't even argue. Until the heart changes, nothing else makes a difference. But he says to those who are perceiving themselves as well, I want you to do this. I want you to go and learn what Hosea meant. When Hosea said, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. And that was as a prophet coming from God. This is a passage that Jesus is referring to. Hosea 6, verses 4 through 6. What shall I do with you, O Ephraim? What shall I do with you, O Judah? Your love is like a morning cloud, like the dew that goes away early. Therefore, I have hewn them by the prophets. I have slain them by the words of my mouth, and my judgment goes forth as light. For I desire steadfast love, not sacrifice, knowledge of God rather than burnt offerings. Well, many times in the New Testament, they quote from what we would call the Septuagint, which is the Greek version of the Old Testament. That Hebrew wording that is used in the book of Hosea and the Greek equivalent to it, the Hebrew word here gets translated steadfast love. The New American Standard would say, I delight in loyalty, not sacrifice. The American Standard says, I desire goodness. The idea behind it is I desire compassion, mercy. The calling here is to love. The calling here, Jesus says, when he quotes this verse, he says, I want you to go and learn what Hosea means. I want you to think through this. When God says, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. Are you going to tell me your religious piety? Are you going to tell me your actions that you seem to put on your airs, and you can wear your phylacteries and you can quote your scriptures? And he said, what does it mean to say, I desire mercy? I desire a steadfast love, not sacrifice. The knowledge of God, of knowing who he is and what he desires, is greater than burnt offerings. Go and learn. It's quite a command coming from the rabbi. He takes us to a passage that says, self-greatness means nothing, but when we humble ourselves before God, when we seek mercy to show it to those who need it most, that's the greater gift to God. Jesus tells a couple of stories during his ministry. One is what we often call the prodigal son. And in the story of the prodigal son, we get that beautiful story of him leaving home, realizing his sin, repenting, and coming back home, and the party that's thrown. We don't normally spend as much time on the elder brother. The elder brother refuses to come to the party. He hears the party. He calls to find out why the party is going on. He knows that his brother has come home, and he decides, I will have nothing to do with that person and his life. And I don't care that he came home. The same father that ran to the prodigal son now comes out to the older brother. And he sits down with the older brother, or he talks to the older brother. And when that boy says, this son of yours went out and squandered everything and left me to do all the work, and I've done everything, and you don't throw parties for me, and I'm the good kid. But this son of yours, because he says, oh, I did some bad stuff and I came home, you just want to love everybody. Well, I'm not playing that game. That attitude, the father looks at, and he says, your brother. He makes it personal. He says, your brother has come home. And that which was lost has been found. That which was dead has been made alive. Do you think saying, I did all the work is greater than going into the party with the younger brother? Or do you think showing mercy was greater than sacrifice? In Luke chapter 14, Jesus tells another story. He says that there is this banquet that this man was going to give, and he sent out announcements ahead of time, saying that he was going to have a banquet. And when the banquet was ready, and he sent out the messengers to tell people to come to the party, everybody started making excuses. They started to say why they couldn't come. And you know what the master does in the story that Jesus tells us? He tells to his servant, he says, I want you to go out and I want you to invite the poor, the lame, the blind, the crippled. I want you to tell them to come in and sit at my banquet table. And the interesting thing is, as the story goes on, the servant does all that, and he comes back to the master. He says, there's still room. He says, I want you to go out to the highways and the byways. I want you to go out to the hedges. I want you to compel them to come and eat with me. But those who receive that invitation, who would not come, they will not sit at my table. Go and learn what it means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. Luke, he's not the greatest, or Matthew, he's not the greatest of guys. I mean, tax collectors were known for lying, extortion, for forcing you to pay more than you had to pay so that they could get rich off of you. And Jesus says, follow me. Jesus could look at the heart of that man and he could see you're far more than a tax collector. You're an apostle of Jesus Christ, a leader of my church. Follow me. Did it make it difficult? Probably. But he came and he followed him. We're all on a spiritual journey, and many of us, as is people, we have a lot of failings. But if we come to God just as we are, if we give ourselves over to him and just follow him, he can do more with us than we could ever do on our own. And the calling is show mercy, not just sacrifice. Love, know me, and let me dine with you. If we can encourage your relationship with Jesus Christ, won't you come as we stand and as we sing?